Hey everybody, and welcome to part 7 of this game creation series. So in this video we're going to be creating a journal or a notebook, whatever you want to call it, and it's going to display some information for the player such as the objectives, descriptions, things like that. So the first thing we can do is go ahead and create another widget. So go to add new, down to user interfaces, then select widget blueprint. Go ahead and name it. I'm going to call this journal underscore blueprint. Then we can open it up. So it's very similar to the heads up display that we did in a previous video. If you want to check it out, there's going to be a link up here to all previous videos. So in the palette, I'm going to search for an image. Drop this in. I'm just going to scale it a bit. Now we need an image to use. You can see I've got some images for the pages of the journal. I have some images for the icons of the buttons you'll need to press to flip the pages. And I also have a few sounds I recorded which will play when the page is turned. Once you've got your pages and any buttons and any sounds that you want to use, we can bring these into the Unreal Engine. I'm just going to go back to the Unreal Engine, close this down for now. Then in the assets folder, I'm just going to open this up. We have some assets already. Let's right click and add a new folder, and we can call this journal assets. So then I want all of these, and we only need 2 sounds. I recorded more just in case we needed them. Again, if you want to download these sounds, I'll make these available as well. So I'm going to use maybe sound 1 and sound 4. And the reason why I'm using 2 different sound effects, one's going to be when the page goes to the left, and one's going to be for when the page goes to the right. Again, you can use the same sound for both, it's up to you. So let's just drag these and bring these in. So now we have these. I'm just going to save all just so we have them in case anything happens. Now I'm first going to select book open, which is the base image. Go back to the blueprint. And now we can just use that image here. So first let's set the anchor point. For these, they're going to be set to the center. Then if we go down, now if we click this arrow here, we'll just use the image that we've selected. So we can see the image size is 1024 by 665. So let's go to the top here. Scale 665. So there we go, that's the first thing we want to add to the screen. So I'm just going to go over here to the image, and I'm just going to lock this into place so we can't move it around by accident. So now we could start adding more pages and more things to the screen, but first I'm just going to compile this. So I'm just going to close this down, go back to the blueprints, and then I'm going to open up the third person character blueprint. So we can see we have the HUD widget and the prompt widget here. So from here what we can do, if we just make a bit more space, and then from this one we can just drag this out, and then if we type create widget, select this one, then if we choose the class to be the journal, then from here we can drag this out, add to viewport. And then one more thing, we could actually set the visibility to be hidden since we don't want it to appear until we press a button. So I'm going to take this return value, and then if we type set visibility, connect this up, and then change this to hidden. There we go. So as I said, we want to press a button for this journal to appear. So we need to create an action mapping. Let's go to edit, project settings, then scroll down to input. So as you can see, we already have a bunch of action mappings already. So let's create another one. Let's call this journal. And then let's select a button. So I'm going to use keyboard. And then the J key. But again, you can use whatever key you want. Close this down, and now we can actually use that action mapping. So right click, let's type journal. And then under the action events, we can select journal. Now from pressed, let's drag this out, and then we need to use a flip-flop, so type flip-flop. So now we need to turn that widget on. So we can see we have over here the widget stuff. So we need to use this return value, and instead of dragging it out and having loads of strings all around, what we could do is just promote this to a variable. So let's select these, drag these over. Just going to disconnect these as well. And to do that, I just held Control and left click just to disconnect. So from the return value, let's drag this out, promote it to a variable. Then let's rename this to be journal widget. Let's make a bit more space here. So now that's been set, let's connect this back up and then just connect this up here and also here, like that. So again, it's just to make things tidier. Instead of grabbing the strings and bringing them down here, we can just use the variable journal widget. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to drag this out, drop it in here, and we're going to get journal. Then from this, I just want to drag this out and then type set visibility. We want this to be visible. And then from B, we just want to reverse this. So I'll just grab this out, set visibility. And this one's going to be hidden. Then connect this up. Now as we progress through this video, we will be coming back to this and adding a little bit more just to make it look even nicer when we press the button. But for now, let's go ahead and test it. So close this down, press play. If we press J, the book now appears. So there's a few things you'll notice. First, we can still move around in the scene, which doesn't look good. We can also jump and interact with things. And there's also nothing on the page, so let's go ahead and fix a few of those things. Let's go back to the third person character. Let's also comment this while we're here. So if we go down and find where we have all the movement stuff, so since we're not using the gamepad, I don't have to worry about this. So here for mouse input, movement input, and also jump, we need to restrict that movement. So we need to create a variable. So over in the variable panel, let's create variable. And then let's type is journal active, question mark. Let's compile that. So let's go down here to the is journal active and grab this, drop this in here. And for this, we want to set is journal active. Connect this up. We'll say yes, it is active. So I'm just going to select this and hold Control W. Connect this up and turn this to false. So now we know when we're in the journal or not. Compile that. Go back down here, and what we could do very simply is add a branch. So from this, type branch, like that. Then grab the variable we just created, drop it in here. Let's just make a little bit of space. Let's just disconnect this, change this to false. So we can say if the journal is active, then the player can't move. If the journal is not active, then the player can move. So we could just add a branch for all these other ones, but that can get a bit messy, especially if we want to stop other things as well, which as we move on through these videos, we will need to restrict more things. What I'm going to do is create what's called a macro. Over here we have the macros, which is above the variables. Let's go ahead and create a new macro. And you can call this anything you want. I'm just going to call this check. And then from here, I'm just going to right click, type branch. And we're just doing the same thing as I did a minute ago. So I'm going to grab the variable, drop this on here, then connect this up to the input. And then we can connect the false to the output. And that's all we need to do. So as I said, we will come back to this macro and probably add more branches for anything else that we want to check if the player can move or not. But for now, that's good. Let's compile that. Get rid of this tab here. So instead of adding the branch, all we need to do is just drag this out and then just type the name of the macro, which I called mine check. Or you can just go over here to the macros and just drop this in, connect it up. So now I have this selected, I can just press Ctrl W to duplicate it, connect this one. So that's all we'd need to do. Again, this is for the gamepad and we're not using the gamepad, so you don't need to do it for this section. All you'll need to do it for is for the mouse, for the jump and for the movement. So let's go ahead and do that now. Go ahead and test it. Press play. Then if we press the J key, I'm moving the mouse and I can't move it. I'm also jumping and trying to go forward and backwards, but we can see it works as it should. Let's go back. So as I mentioned, I want the HUD to disappear when we're inside the journal. So we could go to the journal widget, just drag this out a bit. So from here, we just want to set the visibility of the HUD widget to be hidden and then visible. So I really should have promoted this to a variable. I'm just going to be a little bit lazy and just drag this out now from the return value. Let's bring it over here. And then we can type set visibility. So for the first one, we want it to be hidden. Do the same again. Set visibility. And we can keep this at visible. So now when I compile this, let's just give this a quick test. Press play. So now when I press the J key, we should see the battery and the objectives disappear. It's pretty good. As I mentioned a little bit later on, I'm going to make the journal fade in and out rather than just appear, just to make it look nicer. So now we have that done, we can go back and close down the third person character for now. And then let's start arranging the pages and the things that we want to show the player. So now let's add some more images in. This is going to be for the page. I'm going to set the anchor point to be the center. And then close this down. Go back to the assets. Go to the journal assets. Let's go ahead and add in the pages. I'm going to do objectives left. Open up the journal. Go to the brush. Add this in here. And then to help things a little bit later on, I'm just going to rename this objectives page left. And we could also, in brackets, I'm going to type index 0. So the first two pages, the left and the right, are going to be index 0. Then when we want to flip the page to the other two pages, that'll be index 1. So hopefully this will make sense a little bit later on as we go through it. But for now, let's just move on. Right click on the objectives page, and we're going to duplicate this. We can see it's now been added down here, so let's reposition this. Then I can go here and just find the other objectives, the objectives right. We need to go ahead and rename this one now. Objectives page right. We can lock these into place. Let's go ahead and add some more pages. We can duplicate this one. So now we select this, and this is going to be the tape collection page left, and then index is going to be 1. Then I'm just going to unlock this one, and then I'm just going to move this to be on top of the other one, like this. Go down to the brush, select this, then I'm going to type tape collection. We can see we have the left and the right. Duplicate this one, move it over, change the image, and we're obviously going to add some text to this and some more images when the player collects the tapes. But as I mentioned, we're going to be focusing on the tape collection maybe in a different video. We just want to focus on flipping the pages and getting the whole journal to work. Change this to the graph editor. So we can use the event construct. Let's get rid of the other two. We're going to need to use some variables from the third person character, so we're going to cast to the third person. Cast to third person character. So from the object wildcard, drag this out, get player character, and then we want to promote this to a variable. Rename this player character. There we go. So as I mentioned before, I want the pages to be turned by pressing a key. But if you want to use a button, you can do that too. So go to the palette, type button, and we can drag this in. And let's grab some text. Rename the text to next. And then when the player clicks this button, we can go to the next page. Now remember, if you wanted to do that, you would need to show the mouse cursor. I'm just going to quickly show you. If we go back, go ahead and open up the third person character. Then when the journal widget is activated, so after this set visibility here, what you'd need to do is drag this out and then type set show mouse cursor. Now by default it doesn't appear, so you would need to click this button here, and then we can see we have the player controller set show mouse cursor. Select this, then we can change this to true. So I'm going to duplicate this, Control W, connect this up, set this to false. From the target, let's grab this out and then type get player controller. And then we can connect this up to this one, and if we compile it, I'm just going to show you what that does. If we press play, then when we press the journal key, we can now see we have this this mouse. So the button doesn't actually do anything until we tell it to do something. If we press J, just to close the journal down. So you can see that's how it works, but again, I don't want that. For now, we'll keep it like this, but I'm going to come back later on and then change it so when I press the Q or the E key, that will change the pages. So let's go back to the journal blueprint. If we want to change anything like the text and the font and the colors and things like that, you can always go through these settings and play around with them. So if we scroll down to the bottom, we have these events, and we've got this on clicked event. If we click this, it now adds this input here, which says on clicked button 131. Now again, it would be a good idea to go back to your button and rename this button to next button, because you're going to also need one for previous, and maybe you want a button to do something else, then you'll need a button for that too. So make sure you rename it. It will definitely help you as you move forward. So I'm going to go back to the graph editor, and now we can see it says on clicked the next button. So when the button is clicked, we want something to happen. So we'll need a variable. Let's go to variables, add a new variable, and then we can call this page index. Compile this. If you want to just drag this out, put this over here. We want this to be a whole number, so I'm going to choose an integer. And then by default, we can see the page index is 0. That's good. So now when the next button is pressed, we want to just change the page index to +1. So it just flips the page. So the page index, we want to grab this. We want to set page index. So when the button is pressed. So let's go back, grab the page index, drop this in. Now we want to get the page index. So no matter what the page index is, plus integer. So +1. Now we also probably need to clamp this as well. So say for example, we have 3 pages. We don't want this number to go to 4. Otherwise that'll be a problem. Drag this out and type clamp. So this will clamp between 0 and however many pages you've got. So if we go back, we have page 0, page 1 and page 2. So the maximum is going to be 2. Plug this into the page index. Then from this, what we need to do is drag this out, and we want to type switch on int, which is this one here. And now we can add some pins for however many pages that we've got. So if we click this, so we've got 0, 1 and 2. That's all we need. And again, if you've got more pages, just keep adding more pins. This default here, we can right click and just remove it since we don't need it. And then one more thing we need to do is plug in the selection. So grab this page index here and just drop it on like so. So now all we need to do is decide what should appear or not appear on each page. So you can see we have the objectives page left and right. This one needs to appear on index 0. Then the next 2, which will be the next pages, they're going to appear on index 1. And then the last page is going to appear on index 2. So hopefully that makes sense. So now you can see we have the variables here. So let's grab this and drop it in here. We just want to get. And let's also do the same for the right page, get. Then if we drag this down and we type set visibility. Let's just copy this one. Connect this up. So on the page index 0, these 2 pages will appear. Everything else shouldn't appear. Then when we press the button and the page index goes to number 1, we want the tape collection to appear. So get this, and get that one. And again, we want to set visibility for both of these. Connect these up. And then we can do the same for the next two pages. But before we do that, we're going to have a problem. Let me just compile and show you what I mean. Press play. Press J to add the journal. We can see we have the final pages appearing before the first pages. And that's because it's a layer-based system. So if we go back, we can see whatever is at the bottom here will appear on top. So all we need to do is select these pages like this. Then if we scroll down to the behavior, and then just change the visibility to hidden, compile that. Now if we play this, we should see the first page, which we do. Then when we press this next page button, it switches to the next page. And then when we press it again, nothing happens since we didn't set up the last page. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to add the next page and also add a back button here, or previous button, so we can switch back. And then we're going to add some sounds. Then the sounds will play as if we're flipping through the pages. So let's just go ahead and add in the last two pages. So we have inventory left, inventory right. We want to set the visibility, so Control W, plug these in. So it's coming along. We can see we have our pages here. And we can see this is the next page button. So let's go ahead and create a previous page button. So I'm going to compile this and then just go back to the designer. I'm going to select this next button here and duplicate it. Let's select it. Let's move this over here. Let's change the text to be previous. Then select the text. Let's change this also to previous. And then select the button again. And as we did before, we go down on clicked. Let's create an event. See, it's been added here. Then all we need to do is just kind of reverse this. So I'm going to select all of these here. So these three and the set. Then I'm going to Control W just to duplicate it. Bring this down here. Let's connect this up. And then all we need to do is just change this. So if we grab this and drag this out, and then type minus, integer minus integer, -1, and then just replace this one, and we can delete this. There we go. Then as we did before, we just need to connect this to the switch on integer, like that, just so they're sharing the same connection. So now if we test this, let's see what happens. We can see we can go to the next page and the next page, but when we press the previous button, nothing seems to happen. So let's see what's happening if we go back to the journal blueprint. So by default, it's going to be on page index 0, which is going to show these two pages. So then when the page index increases to 1, these pages appear right on top of these. Then if we set the page index back to 0, we can see that these two will still appear, these two pages. Now all we need to do is just go through these and set these other pages to be hidden. And it's really easy to do, so I'm going to select these two, hit Control W, and then connect these up again, like this. And we want to set these to hidden. On this one here, we want to make sure these two pages are hidden. So again, duplicate these, connect this up, change these to hidden, and that's it. That's all we need to do. So compile this, go back, test it, press J to open the journal. Let's go to the next page. Let's go to the previous page. So there we go, we've got pretty much the basis of the pages done. Now we can just add information and other things to make it look good. So let's go back to the journal, and what we could do, we could probably add the sounds. So if we move this over, So when the button is pressed, I want a sound to play. So let's drag this out. Play sound, and choose play sound 2D. And then we need to select a sound, so we could go here and find it. I think I called it page sound, yeah, page sound 1. So if we compile this, so let's just do the same for this, play sound. And I'm going to select page sound 4. Compile this and let's test it. Let's see what happens. So there's a couple of things. First, when we switch the page, it sounds good. When we switch back, there's a little bit of a delay. If you notice, there's a bit of a delay. So we can fix that one. That's not a problem. So now we're on the last page. If we click this button, it's going to make a noise, which it shouldn't do because the page doesn't turn. So we want to restrict that as well. We could also get rid of the button. So on this last page, when we know we can't go to the next page, let's just make sure this is set to hidden. Then we fix that issue. Same thing when we go to the first page, we don't want to have this button here, so let's go ahead and fix that. So let's first go ahead and fix this sound here. If we click this arrow, we can get a few more properties, like for example the volume and the pitch, but also the start time. So I want to change this start time, change this to 0.5. So let's just test this, see how it sounds. There we go. We could also add a sound for when the journal opens and closes. That's entirely up to you. So we go back to the switch on integer. For the index 2, we want the next button to not appear. So we can get next button, set visibility. I want this to be hidden. But then when it goes to page 1, we're going to need to re-show this. So grab this out, set visibility. This is going to be visible. Plug this in. So now we compile this and test it. So we can see the button no longer appears and we can't press it. Then when we go back, it pops back up. We just do the same thing now for the previous button, so we don't want it to appear on page index 0, but then when it goes to page index 1, we can show it. So that's the page turning stuff done, I guess. The next thing we could do is maybe go back to the designer and start working on some of these pages. Let's lock all these into place. And let's also hide these pages. So if you follow along in the HUD widget blueprint, you'll know it's pretty much the same thing that we're going to do here. We also did it with the objectives as well, so we can use all this information and use all these variables and things that we created previously to add to this journal. So now I'm just going to go through these and add the player objectives, the description, the battery, and so on and so forth with all the things I want to display for the player. But the last thing I want to do is to make the journal fade in and fade out. All we need to do is select the canvas panel, which is everything. So with this selected, let's create an animation. I'm going to call this fade in, out. Then if we go to track, add a new track for the canvas panel. Then if we click track for the render opacity. So for the render opacity, we want this to be 0. And then in the timeline, let's drag this out. So however many seconds you want this to appear. Let's go to ½ a second. And then if we change this to 1, we'll see that this now fades in like that. So now we have this. I'm going to compile it. Then go to the third person character. So back here with the journal widget, let's just make some more space. So from the journal widget, let's drag this out. And we want to type play animation, like so. If we connect the A to the execution pin, connect this to the set visibility. This might get a little bit confusing, so what I'm going to do is just move this back over here. Let's duplicate it and then plug this in like that, just so you don't get confused. Let's grab this journal again. Let's type get fade in and out. plug this into the animation, and this is going to play forward. Select this, duplicate it. So from B, plug this in, connect this up, and we just need to connect up the journal to the target and the fade in and out to the animation. And then we can play from reverse. Let's compile this and see what happens. Press play and open up the journal. So we can see it fades in, does well, but it doesn't fade out. So let's go back to the journal. So what I'm going to do is just from here, drag this out and then type delay. And then let's give this 1 second delay, maybe 1.1 or something like that, just so it goes a little bit over a second. Compile that. Then if we press play, open up the journal, close the journal. There we go. So that's pretty simple. Now we have the journal working. I can go through this and add some text, add some other images, just the same thing we've done before and in previous videos. So if you get stuck or I've not explained anything, be sure to throw some comments below. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to give this video a like. As always, thank you for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in part 8.